Michael Heaver here for Westmonster. I'm with Steve Crowther, Interim UKIP leader. How are you, Steve?
I'm very well, Michael. It's lovely to be with you.
Thank you very much. Steve, I've known you for quite a while now. Could you just give a bit of your background with UKIP? You've been heavily involved for a number of years now. Could you give a bit of background as to what you've done in the party and the roles you've had?
Yeah, I joined UKIP in 2007, actually. Was kind of going through professional change, and I wanted to get more involved in politics, and joined UKIP and the Conservatives at the same time, actually, to see which of them would have the best chance of getting us out of the EU, which is my fundamental political obsession. Had some interesting chats with some fairly senior Conservatives who made it perfectly clear that they were not remotely interested in that, and then met Nigel and joined the party, and in 2009, after the European elections, was very flattered to be appointed by the two Southwest MEPs as their kind of administrator in the Southwest, and so did that for a year. And then Nigel asked me, when he was standing to be a re-elected leader in 2010, if he were elected, would I take on the role of chairman? So I did that for the best part of 6 years, and then when Nigel decided to quit while he was ahead after June 23rd, I did the same.
I mean, you are arguably the most successful party chairman UKIP's ever had, achieved a lot during your time. How do you look back on that period as chairman? Obviously, it being UKIP, there were quite a few eventful episodes.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of you to say that, and it's nice to be able to dine out on that, but actually, you know, the job, Nigel was the guy doing the job. I was just there to make sure that things didn't get in his way, and that he was essentially able to do the thing that he does best. That's really my role, is to be the kind of man that sweeps the horse shit out of the way, really.
Love it. Okay, so looking at the general election recently, obviously, UKIP went down considerably in the vote. How do you look back on that election? What lessons do you think should be learned from it? Do you think anything could have been done differently to UKIP?
The 2017 general election. 2017, yeah. 2017 general election was almost entirely inevitable in terms of how it turned out, in my view. It's not to say that we hadn't had some considerable problems as a party in between, but again, they were not difficult to anticipate as problems. You know, with Nigel stepping off, and as I say, in my view, rightly, at the peak of his achievement, it was always going to be difficult for us to replace him, but it was also necessary. And UKIP, in order to prove that it is a proper political party with a future rather than the Nigel Farage Support Society, needed to be able to replace him. And it was always going to be tricky and difficult. And we had to go through some somersaults, really, to effectively arrive at where I think we are now, actually, which is where we have a slate of 7 high-quality, articulate candidates, you know, with widely differing propositions to a degree, quite a wide spread of propositions, if I may put it that way, and some clearly that I would not want to see leading the party, but that is the whole purpose of elections, is to have that choice. But it is a strong lineup of contenders, and we haven't had that up to this point, and we had to go through some machinations to get there. We had to go through some pain to get there. So, going into the general election, we had that as part of our narrative. We had the Stoke by-election as part of our narrative, which was unfortunate. That was a really self-inflicted wound.
In what way?
It just wasn't our finest hour, to be perfectly honest. A number of things conspired together to mean that we really didn't do well. We did not do well by our own standards in the Stoke by-election, which I think is a shame. But, of course, in the general election, we were always going to be suffering from the, well, you've done your job, thanks ever so much, I can't really understand why you're still here, factor. And that was then compounded, of course, by the fact that Theresa May had called this snap election to get herself a mandate to deliver Brexit. And, you know, like it or not, it's her job to do it. It's not ours now. And so I know people who have been absolutely dedicated UKIP activists, Tory haters for 20 years who voted Tory because they said, well, you know, we want Brexit. And we've got to give her the mandate. So, we were always going to get slaughtered.
So that being said, you know people that have been long-time UKIP supporters and they're now sort of turned their back on the party, gone back to the Conservatives or whatever.
They did in that election.
How do you see UKIP moving forward, gaining back that support, moving back up the polls, winning elections?
Well, I think it's funny how things turn out. I mean, one of the things that is really remarkable about UKIP is that we are apparently lucky. We appear to be really lucky. Now, I actually say, yes, we are lucky, but it's kind of rather like Napoleon and his generals. We are lucky because we are in the right place and in the right time saying the right things. We are lucky because we're right. And, of course, those people that decided to put their trust in Theresa May in the general election regretted it. Some of them regretted it halfway through and actually voted Labour instead. So I think there is what's interesting is that we did kind of sink, but we have plateaued and are starting to bounce. Interesting, isn't it, that ourselves and the Liberal Democrats in the latest opinion poll over the weekend were on 5% each, and you kind of look at that and you think, wow, I'm not comfortable that we're on 5%, but I see that as a positive right now. The Liberal Democrats, wow, they must be so frustrated. What can they do? What can they do to actually rise? And I begin to think that when you look at that, I think you said, well, actually, that's quite interesting. What can they do? What proposition do the Lib Dems have anymore? We have the really live, really strong protest proposition in the political system now. We have it and we've still got it. And people understand that we are not only are we a good way of protesting the two-party system, but we're a successful way. We've won. We won last year. This is the most extraordinary thing. We won the biggest democratic vote ever taken in this country. And, that's impressive, and we have it in the bank.
Do you think that protest moving forward is going to manifest itself, if people were going to go back to UKIP in the form of Brexit, or do you think there are other issues that could become more prevalent in sort of people turning to UKIP and back?
I'm absolutely certain that there are. I mean, there are some specific issues that are clearly being bandied around quite heavily in the election campaign, in the leadership campaign, there are some aspects of our sort of cultural future which clearly concern people. But I believe this is not all about Brexit, although Brexit clearly is still very much current for us, and we have a lot to say on that. And I believe that a good number of people will be coming back to us as an insurance policy on Brexit. There is that whole question of Islamism, which is exercising people. But I actually believe there's much more than that. There is this, and this is something we've been looking at in terms of our kind of rebrand project. What is UKIP's proposition going forward? Because, and if I may just sort of flip back, I became a Eurosceptic a very long time ago. And one of the reasons I was a Eurosceptic was because people used to say, quite soon after we'd gone into the European project, well, of course, we could never come out of that because it would be terribly difficult. And I always thought to myself, that isn't the reason not to do it. Doing difficult things is what makes you good at stuff. Refusing to do difficult things generally leads you to being sort of fat and unfit. And therefore, I've never thought it was a problem. We do have a problem now, which is that we have had a surge of a sense that we want our sovereignty and our nationhood back. But the institutions of the country, the government institutions, aren't really fit. They are not fit to, the way I put it is, we've got our sovereignty back. Are we actually in shape to do anything with it? And I think that's UKIP's mission, is to say, right, we've now got to say, what are we going to do with this? And when you look at the way that the public discourse happens over Brexit and the negotiations, you look at it, you go, for heaven's sake, people, there's a lot of idiocy around in politics. There's a lot of just sort of lack of rational thought, lack of sensible, balanced debate. And we've got to try and reintroduce that into politics. We've had a terribly kind of centrist, middle-of-the-road, faintly kind of leftist consensus going on, and it hasn't been good for us. And I think UKIP can do something about it.
And in terms of the ongoing Brexit negotiations, we've seen obviously David Davis, Michel Barnier, we've seen the conferences, we've seen the tittle-tattle, we've seen the rumours. What's the UKIP view on how these negotiations are going?
The UKIP view, what I always say when asked about these things is, well, so Michel Barnier has just had another fit because we've said something he doesn't like. And you know, one gets the BBC on going, oh, this is terribly serious. I go, no, it's what's called a negotiation. That's what a negotiation is. You know, when people say, well, I'm not having that, that's what's called negotiating. So I've never taken a particularly, I've been very worried about it. I have read Yanis Varoufakis' book, and I listened to him the other day talking about the great EU runaround. And I think it is interesting that I suspect that our people went into the negotiations thinking that's what they were going to do. They were going to sit down with some people and actually do a negotiation. In other words, you know, give and take. What do you think? What do you think? Whereas what they found, of course, was the EU stone wall, which was actually Michel Barnier is not empowered to negotiate with them. He's simply been told what he's got to go and get. But that's fine. There is always an immovable force as well as a whatever the thing is, the immovable object. So I've been saying for a while now shouting to our lot, well, you've got to stop now. First of all, we should not accept that we're actually having any further talks until they drop the ransom demand. I mean, that's just ridiculous. They say, well, you agree to pay us 80 billion or we won't talk to you. I mean, it's ridiculous. I actually think it's illegal because I think it's against the Bribery Act. Because there's no legal basis for them asking us this money. So I think we should say, well, look, you're not really taking this very seriously. So we'll go away and you tell us when you're ready to talk again. Because we have far more cards on our side than the kind of doom mongers say. So that's my view. I think we should just play hardball.
And just turning back to the UKIP leadership contest then, you've obviously probably heard what's going on around the country in terms of the hustings.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the feeling, do you think, around the membership? Is this a party that's got an uncertain future? Is there confidence? What are people saying on the ground about the future of UKIP? What do they want? Well,
what I'm really fascinated by and I'm really reassured by is that obviously we had this rising trend of membership right the way through the campaign for the last sort of 3 years up to the point where we hit June 23rd last year. And then it started to tail off, which didn't surprise me. You know, there's a lot of people who thought, job done, you know, take a deep breath, I'll go back and do my garden. What is interesting is that it seems to have really gone back to effectively quite a robust membership of around 30,000 of people who genuinely are committed to the party, who are not involved in the party just for Brexit, but see it as a way to really kind of, you know, clean up politics, get us back to some of the values that we have always thought we shared. And I think there's a great willingness to take the party on its next journey. There is an argument at the moment, perhaps, as leadership contests tend to be, about the direction and intensity of that journey. But I do think there's a lot of goodwill. Having said that, you know, there's leadership elections are never very edifying things. They are always about turning people effectively on each other. So it's always a little bit kind of full of sound and fury. But after it's over, I feel sure that we will rally round and start a new phase of our mission.
And looking at that field of candidates, is there any candidate in particular that you have in mind that you would like to see win? Is there any particular candidate you wouldn't want to see win, that you wouldn't want to be involved in the party figure?
Yes, and yes.
But you're not saying who?
No.
Okay. And just looking ahead to the conference in Torquay next week, what can people expect from that?
Well, there's a lot there, actually. There is a tremendous amount there. Because first of all, you know, on Friday morning, we're going to be looking at this whole rebrand that we've been working on. And I'm absolutely convinced from early signals that actually members are going to be really pleased with it rather than shocked, as you know, they're very worried because they love UKIP and they love our brand and they love the pound sign and all that stuff, as they should. But I think they're going to see the sense in our coming out and saying, right, we're new and fresh and we've got something new to say. So we've got that. We've got the announcement of the leadership. We've got some interesting people coming over from European parties to come and talk to us. Somebody from the AFD and also from Czech politics, one of President Klaus's close advisors. And that always energises the members at conference. They love seeing people of a like mind from the European parties. And so that's going to be interesting. And I just think it's going to be a very exuberant conference, actually, because there's a big appetite amongst those UKIP members that are still with us to pick ourselves up and get going again.
And just finally, your personal political future, could you see yourself serving, continuing in an active role under a leadership candidate, if so asked?
Well, I'm a member of the NEC. I was very flattered to be elected top of the list at the last NEC election. I take that responsibility seriously, and therefore, assuming that the party is going in a direction that I find that I can subscribe to, then I will continue to provide whatever help I can in that way. But other than that, I'm very happy to hand on to a new generation of people who can draw their swords and lead the charge.
Steve Crowther, thank you very much.
Thank you.